Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful guitar music. I'm Majda Gama, and I'm hosting tonight along with our series founder, Karen Alanier. Henry Crawford, tech wizard extraordinaire, is behind the scenes working his magic. Give him a shout out. Our featured poets tonight are Barbara Goldberg and JC Todd. Karen will kick the evening off by introducing Barbara, and I will introduce JC. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. The links for buying books and making a donation will be in our chat. Audience members have been muted. This helps prevent feedback problems for our readers and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. They do sometimes happen, but I know you'll forgive us if they do. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or show your appreciation of our featured poets, and please do that. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. Also be sure to turn into the WordWorks Poets versus the Pandemic program, which will be on Wednesday, April 13th at 7 p.m. featuring poet Margot Taft-Stever, as well as guest poets Aaron Caicedo Kimura and Mervyn Taylor. Please do also join us for our next Café Muse meeting on Monday, May 2nd. We will feature the poets Barbara Ross and Maggie Smith. Yes, that Maggie Smith. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to WordWorks founder Karen Alanier to introduce Barbara.
So I have known Barbara Goldberg since 1981, when the WordWorks awarded her the first Washington Prize for her poem, Nay, Maggie Malone. It's a brave, outrageous poem in a writing style that is lively and likely to induce a double take. A poem that begins, "She didn't shave her legs or underarms." Her first book, Berta Broadfoot and Pepin the Short, a Merovingian romance from the WordWorks, is likewise in that mode where sharp things come front and center about a princess swapped for her caretaker's daughter, told the bridegroom would come to kill her with a knife. Yikes. It's a book illustrated with masterful woodblock prints from Rosemary Covey. I'm sure you consider yourself lucky if you have a copy of this amazing set of poems and eye-popping art. I hope Barbara will read one of these poems tonight. In between Berta Broadfoot and her brand new Breaking and Entering new and selected poems, which the WordWorks family is so proud of, Barbara won publication prizes from other presses, such as the University of Wisconsin Press Felix Pollock Prize in Poetry for the Royal Baker's Daughter. No doubt, Barbara will give you a tour through her many excellent collections that are represented in her new book. You will notice that her work is juicy with matters of sex, death, and human behavior. This intro would be incomplete if I neglected to say she also won the Valentin Krostev Award for her book, Transformation, The Poetry of Translation, not to mention the many books of translations she authored or co-authored. And she continues to work adeptly in the field of poetry translation as the managing editor of the WordWorks imprint International Editions. Recipient of 2 National Endowment for the Arts fellowships, as well as awards in fiction and speech writing, I present to you the WordWorks' own super winner, Barbara Goldberg. Take it away, Barbara.
Well, after that, I feel obliged to read only my dirtiest poems, but I just want to say that in honor or in sorrow with this war in the Ukraine, and I'm not going to go into it, I'll just say that there are 2 Twitter feeds. I'm not on Twitter, but the two feeds that I read are from Ilya Kaminsky and Michael McFaul, who was a former ambassador to Russia. I'm sure there are many more, but I did want to read this. I find it astonishing that in these times, the great poets seem to turn to praise, the darkest times. And this is a poem by Ilya that starts, "If I speak for the dead, I must leave this animal of my body. I must write the same poem over and over, for an empty page is the white flag of their surrender." And he has more. However, leaving that, I was once asked, or lots of poets are asked, who do you write for? And my answer is always for myself, a few friends, and God. So when I think of writing poems for myself, my pleasure, I don't care whether you get it or not, because this is about me, this part of it, is I like to put in puns and jokes, and you're not going to hear them because they're on the page. So I thought that I would begin this reading and end the reading with poems that have some puns in it, and see if you can at least guess the words where they are. The first poem I'll read is called No Small Feat, and it's part of a longer series, not Berta, but a kind of a fable. And it goes like this. The characters have names like Grief and Chance. So this starts out, "No small feat for Grief to doff his mourning cloak, the velvet heft of it, and its scarlet knot, emblazoned in cross stitches, insignia for not enough. He might easily have kept it on, remaining wrapped in sorrow, for surely there is enough sorrow in this world to dwell in. If we could earn a crown for every soul we found shrouded in despair, why, we'd be richer than a dozen kings," which explains why moths grow fat and tailors are by nature cheerful, day in, day out, their nimble finger stitching habits of our own choosing. This poem is called Ballad of the Id. And I meant to, in writing this book, Breaking and Breaking and Entering, as many of my friends will attest, it took over a year with my obsessions to find the right image. It was terribly difficult, especially since Breaking and Entering, you don't usually think of towers and naked ladies, except that I kind of imagined that tower being, and the breaking of it, the unconscious, the breaking of the unconscious. So here comes Ballad of the Id in true Freudian form. I am your rose hips and bunting and bootleg, and I am your black bangs, those devil spikes. And I am your spine when you lie down in tickle grass, the zipper, the cock, all glistening and white. And I am the stars that roll in their sockets, that blink on the night. I could be Gibraltar or jukebox or drumstick. Without me, you're puny and pallid and prudish, and with you're a banquet, a wishbone with tassels. That time in the bistro, I bit your sister and squealed on the porter. And who pulled you out of the muck of intention? Who sang hosannas for spunk and risk? Who shorted the sheets? Who stole your tom-toms? Just act and I'll tell you, I did. And here's another funny thing, when I got to the muck of intention, that was supposed to be the much of intention, and that was a mistype. And I have to say, I love the muck of intention better than the much. And now I'm going to read a poem that is not about me, because poets don't just write autobiography, I swear. This is about my friend Phyllis. I know why I am here. I made one small hole in the breast pocket of my husband's hunting jacket. He loves this jacket, faded dull green from early morning rain. I have done my work neatly with his pocket knife. He will not be able to trace the incision back to me. I have committed this act because his arms are too short, his kisses too dry, and because he double checks doorknobs before departures. I know I am here in the brass bed of my lover. It is partly hunger, partly love. I have brought strawberries for the occasion. He buries them one by one between my thighs, then sucks them out whole, saying they taste of musk, having ripened in darkness. One day my husband will discover the damaged pocket and will ache with the loss of perfect fabric. It is vital to add, he is allergic to dust and berries of all kind, and thus cannot partake of my legitimate fruit. Well, I grew up in a family where the uninvited guest was the Holocaust. My mother, when she was carrying me, didn't know if her own parents were alive or dead. And she found out after the war that they were dead. But it was, I just remember my childhood always being attentive to the phone and finding out, what was next and who got reparations and who didn't. So therefore, it sounds a little funny if I tell you that when I misbehaved, which I guess was frequently, I don't know why, that this was the particular, chosen form of punishment. This one is called Star. Yeah, that's what I thought. No, I'm reading, sorry, Girls Trade Baby for Prom Dress. And this is when I thought I'd write a whole series on headlines from the Inquirer. And this was one that particularly intrigued me. And it's Girl Trades Baby for Prom Dress. And that was fascinated by that, but for the longest time, I couldn't get started on this poem. And a friend of mine said, imagine the dress. And that's what did it for me. That cracked it open. How smug we feel, we who measure want in dollops. But imagine her wanting to distraction and to be so trapped. That's how much she wants the blue chiffon with blue spaghetti straps, blue rose pinned to the waist, and shoes dyed to match. She wants the gardenia wristlet to dance under the bluest moon, a chance to be elected queen, to neck in a rented limousine. A horse isn't hers to give, nor gold, nor tea. Kings have traded more, been called heroic. When Anna abandoned Sergei, wasn't she tragic? These days I feel my own parched throat, the bedrock crumbling for the fecundity of your embrace. I too would pay, and dearly. And when I was about 50, it's because I could see everyone's applause, more. When I was about 50, an aunt of mine who I didn't know very well told me after my parents were dead that my father had had a mistress. And I think that she was thinking she would hurt me with that. But actually, I know this sounds crazy, but I was really happy for him because I believe everyone should have love in their life. And I didn't believe my mother and my father, especially when I was 50, was the perfect match. So that's why I gave him 3 mistresses, because one is never enough. And I imagine 3 very different women. My father's mistress, she of no name. Maybe she wore sensible shoes, unlike our mother of the high heels. Maybe she had a booming voice and onions did not upset her stomach. I see freckles and a pug nose, sky blue eyes, flaxen hair, she making him laugh with imitations of Peter Lorre and Zsa Zsa Gabor. Maybe they met before the war, fell madly in love, but forbidden to marry. So maybe he merely settled for my mother, who looked like Jean Tierney, the most beautiful woman on earth, according to Daryl Zanuck. To my mother, looks were everything, and she worked hard at it, always coiffed, always clean. Who knows what drove my father to persist? Summer after summer, checking into the same Swiss sanitarium, he told us, to lose weight, despite a wife who gave the best parties in Forest Hills, served the best sachatorto off the creamiest Limoges. Everyone ran circles trying to please him, who made him lord of the table. And this is Lily. He did go to a Swiss sanitarium every summer when they were married. And he said he went for 2 weeks and he did say it was to lose weight. And I believe him, but who knows what else was going on. But had it been me, I would have chosen Lily Robinson for her cigarette holders and thin pell-mells, the only one in the refugee circle who drew a beauty mark next to her mouth, wore slinky black tuxedo pants paired with a white satin blouse. She had the same air as Marlene Dietrich, only Lily's hair was black and shiny with razor-sharp bangs and spit curls. Who wouldn't have adored Lily? So devil-may-care, singing chanson, while husband Willie ran chords along the baby grand. Rumor had it that there was a threesome, Lily, Willie, and Dodo, all three of them the best of friends. The rest of the country loved Ozzie and Harriet. No wonder I felt a world apart, where everyone here was because of Hitler. Everyone escaped while others had perished. Everyone took pills to bring on sleep, took marital risks, drove too fast, favored sweets, and could not get enough. And this was the poem I was searching for. It's called Star. It was a silver star with the word liar stamped on it. And my father made me wear it because I was one. He knew I hadn't taken my bath, just turned the faucets on. Knew my scrapbook on Brazil was overdue, 2 pictures of the Amazon pasted on the cover. Spinning stories to wriggle out of things made him madder, one deceit compounding another, especially since my father was a man of his word, and his word was gold. I was glad when he died and could let Danny fill me up with no one the wiser. Glad he didn't see me run through his money like a woman bent on ruination. If only he could have lied a little. He who had so little charm, so little social grace. But for him, truth was absolute, was never grave. As for me, there are so many truths, it's hard to tell the one big one that underlies them all. I loved my father, love him even more today, though he was mean and cut me down to size. And I was small to begin with. He left me bare of subterfuge, without a leg to stand on, but my own. And the last poem I'll read is Miracle of Bubbles. And this is the last poem, so you know there's another thing to pleasure myself here. And those of you who are from Washington may remember this story. As a matter of fact, this is what was happening when Karen, Bob Sargent, called me to say I had won the Washington Prize. And I was very satisfying, I think, because I couldn't stop screaming. But this is what was happening on TV, you know, while the other thing was happening, the Miracle of Bubbles. A woman drives to the video store to rent a movie. It is Saturday night. She is thinking of nothing in particular. perhaps of how later she will pop popcorn or hold hands with her husband and pretend they are still in high school. On the way home, a plane drops from the sky, the wing shearing the roof of her car, killing her instantly. Here is a death. It could happen to any of us. Her husband will struggle the rest of his days to give shape to an event that does not mean to be understood. Since memory cannot operate without plot, he chooses the romantic. How young she was, her lovely waist, or the ironic. If only she had lost her keys, stopped for pizza. At the precise moment the plane spiraled out of control, he was lathering shampoo into his daughter's hair, blonde and fine as corn silk, in love with his life, his daughter, the earth, for corn silk is how he thought of her hair, in love with the miracle of bubbles, how they rise in a slow dance, swell and shimmer in the steamy air, then dissolve as though they never were. Thank you. Oh, just think, in case we get back to it, in this poem, the word is waist. How young she was, her lovely waist. And in the first poem, it was the morning cloak and no small feet. So those are the spelling kind of puns. So thank you very much. Looking forward to you, JC.
Wow. Thank you, Barbara. And oh my gosh, congratulations on the publication of your new and selected. It's your legend precedes you. I was not disappointed one bit. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce JC Todd to you. And she's reading from her new book, Beyond Repair. In an interview with the Night Heron Barks, JC shares that Beyond Repair is a book that took some 20 years to form and was only really honed down into the book we now have during lockdown. It is a book that, quote, takes us from a lullaby to a requiem, unquote. That it covers such an arc while also bearing witness to the life-fracturing consequences of various theaters of war is a literary feat I truly admire. JC bravely places the war of her American family in the context of both the American home front and Middle Eastern battlefields. War is not just over there, it's displayed in her window along with a blue star that alerts the community to the active service of her family members. Indeed, it is knowing that she could have been a Gold Star mother that motivated her to write these poems. I also admire that JC wrestled with questions of appropriation and privilege while writing third-person poems set in the Middle East, before allowing herself the weapon of language and using the English language in ways to break down distance, barriers, time, the body, and the battlefield. She distances us from the brutality of what is on the page by allowing the grammatical and psychological separation of the first, second, and third person to break us down. In this way, we, the reader, become multiple bodies, fighting internal and external wars over there and over here, while also retaining our humanity. Beyond Repair is a book of witness and embodiment, which expands our perspective of the early wars of the 21st century, and then brings the war back to the American body in order to place some order on the disorder of those traumatic years. JC Todd's recent books are Beyond Repair, a special selection for the Able Muse Press Book Award, and The Damages of Mourning, Moonstone Press, 2018, a finalist for the 2019 Eric Hoffer Award. She is the winner of the 2016 Rita Dove Poetry Prize, twice a finalist for Poetry Society of America Annual Awards, and most recently, a highly commended winner in the 2022 National Poetry Contest of the Poetry Society of the United Kingdom and that is a big deal. She has held fellowships from the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, Bemis Center, UCross, Ragdale, Hambidge Center, and the Virginia Center for Creative Arts and its International Artist Exchange Program. Her poems have appeared in the American Poetry Review, Baltimore Review, the Paris Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, and other journals. Please, please welcome J.C. Todd to Café Muse.
Thank you for that introduction and for kind of setting up this reading by referring to that interview. I'm really honored to read for Café Muse, and I want to thank Karen, Alan Year, Henry Crawford, Susan Oakey, and Barbara Goldberg. Those poems are astonishing. They're really bad girl poems, and they're beautifully crafted, and I just love them. Thank you. I'm going to read tonight from Beyond Repair. It has taken me a long time to write this book. It was sort of a slow cook. But I want to begin with a new poem, the one that was just given an award by the Poetry Society of the United Kingdom. And this is its first outing. And so I'm happy to share it with you. It takes place at a friend's memorial service. Old friends here and gone. Hey, Kinky, he says, checking me out at our friend's memorial. Cause of death, a cancer in the folds of brain inside the bony structure that gave her face such beauty. During chemo, her grace grew equal to reversals, her scalp bared, and the muscles of her left hand too weak to hold a watercolor brush. He had soothed her in the hospital, the hospice, spooning ice chips, vegan broth. When her speech meandered beyond understanding, he had listened to the streams of sound as if to a jazz too wild for human sense. Sonny Rollins breaking loose on sax, or Johnny Hodges yowling through his golden flugelhorn. I'm biggin', Johnny moaned one clammy night, blue handkerchief mopping the crown of his head through a white crocheted cap. Begging for mercy. That's what I'd needed back then. My sadness set free by restraints and rough sex. The clarity of sudden, more essential than its pain. Still kinky? He asks. In the hand I can't forget, a glass of gin, its surface undisturbed, held in perfect tension by the rim. His eyes calm, returning my face to me, calmed, as his gaze had done in our turbulent year. And again this spring for our friend who, I have heard, rallied at his touch, eyelids blinking open, although the optic nerve was bruised by the tumor's mounting pressure, and sudden light hurt her eyes. Now I'll move on to the poems of Beyond Repair. Barbara, I'm so glad you read first because there's levity, and I'm not sure there's much levity in this. So I'm going to start with a poem, a spring poem honoring Ramadan. The poem is located in Damascus, the suburbs of Damascus, about 8 years ago during Ramadan. And the town names are in Arabic. There's a sweet dessert named fried collage. The poet Rumi appears, and then the stringers, the foreign freelance journalists, come in too. Dark of the Moon. In Rif Damashq, the suburbs of Damascus, in Yarba, in Duma, Daraya, Arbin, where parents caution, try not to die today. Here, the jeeps and troops sweep districts, flood the courtyard walls and windows with sniper shots, rake the rooftops that Rumi praised. Go to the roof and sing, sing loud. In the dark of the moon, the suburbs sleep, except the men who congregate behind closed doors where the coffees and the juices flow, sweetened with rumors and deals. When prayers split the dawn, their praises will rise over a scattering of corpses, not the heaps of 2012, the bled out limbs and torsos blocking boulevards and alleys, or the next years, frozen in cars, in bazaars, not a speck of blood, gassed to perfect death. Who says Damascus has regained its normal? The foreign stringers who fly in to write of heaps of dates and trays of fried collage that scent the midday markets as the city readies for the fast and feast of Ramadan. Their local drivers travel resurfaced roads, won't take the turns into the suburbs where shipments of wheat and medicines are seized. Here, crouched under searchlights and starlight, citizens pluck seed heads from spring grasses, strip leaf buds from trees. No dates, no sweet desserts for famine's holy feast. Gerard Manley Hopkins, I read that, I must have been, I don't know, in my early 20s when I read this. It was an entry from his diary. He wrote, "When you look hard at a thing, it looks hard at you." And that was sort of my guide as I was writing these poems. I was looking hard at war and its traumatic effect on women who lived in war zones, citizens and combatants. Primarily looking at war in the Middle East, in Syria and Iraq. The next poem is taken almost directly from a conversation I had with a friend, Fadwa, who was born in Lebanon and whose family lived throughout the Middle East. "It's war," Fadwa said. A cousin moved to Baghdad from Tehran, gone. Her children, gone. Or all of them missing, which may not mean gone, but just beyond reach, which may mean alive or not. "It's war," Fadwa says, and there's no fog in her sorrow and clarity. 10 years, she says, no word, wishing no one dead, even if they are. A lot of these poems focus on just daily life. There's no heroes, there's no valorization. It's just how people get on while the world is exploding around them. In these three poems, the place names are Syrian, but I do want to say that they could be Ukrainian. They could be Iraqi. They could be any of many African languages. And I could move to South America and keep going. Night Ride, Raka. At every checkpoint, long waits, corpses. In the back seat, her water breaks. The crown not stopping. Newborn pushing into all of this. In a schoolyard, a classroom open to the sky by a daybreak of bombs. Bright random eye pop of red, a boy hunched over handlebars, pedaling past snipers, and three more playing torture, playing execution against the one wall left standing. Standing there, a girl, hand held out, offering a fistful of fingers. A bed in Al Rajan. Bed shams scattered, linens tugged from the taut restraint of tucked in corners. The clock ticks, the heart ticks, the bird keeps drilling the tree across the courtyard that we lost in the explosions. Drill, tick, whoosh of blood, the thick perfume of hyacinths heating up, all indivisible from this mangle. But there is no this, just fractions of flesh, a nose and no body, an ear and no body, a tongue and no body. Without a speaker, language, what is it? Not the stories that rise on words, not the image as an illustration. Bed, shams, scattered, linens, drilling, birds, hyacinth, fragments. Have they made the bed as Allah makes it, while we are thinking war unmade the bed? So those are civilian experiences, but there were many women, US women, American women in Iraq and in Afghanistan as invaders. And so I want to turn to the traumatic effects of one of those. A United States Air Force physician, a female. This is from a hybrid kind of flash fiction, Petrarchan sonnet mishmash. It's a sequence. And we'll see her on her last day of deployment in Iraq. They're third person poems, but they're very much in her head. And so they kind of, they use that fiction writer's technique of close third person. This damage check delay beyond her control. Her crew held on board, that too. And the stack of crates whose joints are stained Atari black, the downshift of scent to stench as the hold heats up, ground time stretched past noon. The porthole pelted by sand and wind, a maniac beat like death metal drumming. Perfect Iraq send-off for her exit. How will her soul convalesce from this tour of racket and ruin? She is alive, but festering, rot in her cells, like these boxed remains, ID packet taped to each lumpy shroud. She's zeroed out, too close to nothing to even feel alone, as flat as a JPEG, grade to monotone. Well, there's always the issue, isn't there? And I'm really glad it was mentioned, of appropriation. I have a relatively privileged life, I have a freezer full of food. I have medicine anytime I need it. When I open the door, no one is rolling dead bodies out of taxis into my yard. So my point of view, well, how did it develop? Well, I'm not going to talk about that exactly, but I do want to read two poems in which the witness comes forward in first person. In the first of these, I should back up a bit, because I have to, in this book, say, who is the speaker of the poem? Who speaks the book? What is her stake in it? So in the first poem, it opens with a veteran experiencing post-traumatic flashback, but then the witness of this steps forward in first person. And then the second poem is fully in first person. Particles. Now there is a clot in the heat-dried air. Her voice retreats inward. She swallows commands there was no time to give, holds them down. Like tracers, they light what she saw. The air was a coarse ground of red meat. She tries to deny it, but the memory of their shoulders clings like sand on her tongue, and certain thoughts spin like stuck wheels. Suppose the air returns to being the air, and that long day of heat cools down. Now, knowing what she knows, how can I not see blood in the cloud stream of sunset? My daughter, no pills can erase, no remorse clear the air of particles you breathed in. They circulate in you. You entered the compound behind the fire team, and all but you are gone. This poem is located, there are two locations in this poem. One is Hama, which is a town in southwestern Syria. And it is where the government of Syria initiated its war against its people in 1982. And I want to say this war is continuing. It's 2022. And then Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which I won't even comment on. I mean, it's a burg, right? In whom the dying does not end. Just as her eggs began to cluster along the genital ridge, and the neural groove began to close, its cells churning toward brain. Just as a vacuole opened to become a mouth, and nubs of her limbs budded, Hafez, father of Bashar, ordered the military force of his regime to crush the revolt of the Muslim Brotherhood. It happened in Hama while I gestated, TV off, newspapers unread in Harrisburg, my thinking sludgy, speech cut back, consumed by what I fed. In February, the month I mostly slept through, a cat curled at each hip and a riot of cells firing between them. From the second day until the 22nd, the troops of Hafez attacked the people that Hafez ruled. 20,000 dead, some say more, in 20 days, while her thousand cells swelled and halved, dividing into human, the only daily news I was aware of. Loved, she grew, singular, anarchic, safe in the province of my body, and Hama was raised. Hama, the mouth opens to begin, ha, then closes, ma, dampered, Hama, 2 exhalations drained of oxygen. Hama, they say to say more dishonors the dead, dishonors the living, in whom the dying does not end. Hama, where no one dares to say the names of the dead except in secret. Hama, thousands distilled into smudge, smear, stain on crumbling walls whose shadows the living merged into, hoping to be unseen. What happened in Hama, not asked as a question, stated to point to what can't be said. The city, rubble and crater, the dust of flesh, of sand and stone, a red, reproaching speech. In 1982, October 6th, my speech returned, my breasts reclaimed, a buzz with milk. I woke, delivered by her birth, into what I'd missed, the world where she would live, its playing fields and killing floors. Tiananmen, Somalia, Cairo, Standing Rock, Gaza, Ferguson, Aleppo, where some will say nothing is left, not even names. Thank you.
Thank you, JC. I actually genuinely teared up. Thank you for that. I just have to say that Yusuf Komunyakaa blurbed this book, and I think we can see why. You really are standing in his feet, bearing witness. And also I was reminded of Carolyn Forche quite a lot. I know you mentioned her and Dunya Mikhail in the interview with the Night Heron Barks, and you're right there with them. Amazing. I don't want to speak too much. I think we have time for a Q&A. Karen, is that right?
I think we have time for just one question. And, you know, I think that this is a very, I think it's difficult to pose one question for a powerful reading like this on from both poets. So I think we'll go with this, and that is who are your go-to poets for you know, the studies that you both do of human behavior? So JC, could you start, please?
Yes, well, Carolyn Forche was, I was pregnant when I met her. She sat in my living room and I couldn't speak because I really had pretty much lost the ability to speak for one phase of my pregnancy.
Oh.
But her early book, The Country Between Us, for me was a landmark book and turned my head in a direction that I think I've been looking at since childhood, but as a kind of spectator. And then I'm tried to learn how to move into witness. Dunya Mikhail is an Iraqi poet who has lived in exile in the US, I think near Detroit, for maybe 20 years. Her early book, which was written in Arabic, The War Works Hard, then was translated. The translation of that book really affected me. She was in the midst of it, and also she had been named a public enemy, so there was money, set on her head. And she kept writing. And she wrote very clear-eyed poems, not casting blame, just showing what war was. Yusef's books, War Horse, and Neon Vernacular, Dian Cao, those particularly. And then not poems, then I had to do a lot of research. I had a son, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson in Iraq and Afghanistan over 10 years. There was always someone there from the family. And I had no idea what their daily lives were about. And that's when I turned to the stories of Syrian refugees, because there were lots of them. It had started in 82, right? So you could read those stories and to begin to understand the consequences of my family's involvement. And then I read military blogs to understand their own daily lives.
Well, that's really helpful. I think that really positions us better to more fully appreciate what you have delivered tonight. It's very searing, very powerful. Thank you so much. Barbara, what can you add relative to your influences relative to human behavior?
I was going to say I can always go to the Brothers Grimm, who are grimness itself, and Struwwelpeter. I don't know how many of you know Shock-Headed Peter, which was written by a German pediatrician who should have been drawn and quartered. They are such sadistic tales. But in terms of the way my mind works, I think two poets I have found particularly interesting are Louise Gluck, and you don't hear his name much anymore, but Bill Matthews. He had such a fine dancing intellect that I really enjoy that. As for contemporary, I love Diane Seuss and Victoria Chang and all these crazy associations. And I'm very interested in character. I think unlike a lot of poets, maybe it's because I'm somehow always making up stories. So the characters, the stories, I don't think they're really from poetry. They're from other sources. I once was kidding with Karen and I said it's because I eavesdropped a lot. I had plenty of stories. They weren't my own, but they were all the people who were in my house, who were refugees and survivors.
Well, thank you both. I think, again, Barbara, you positioned us well to understand your big book, and certainly, yeah, the Brothers Grimm come to mind for sure. So I thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it back to Majda, who will finish out the program.
Thank you, Karen. I love those Q&As. I think everybody does. And I hope the poets appreciated them too. So thank you, Barbara and JC. You complemented each other perfectly. You're big-hearted, big-spirited poets, and I appreciate that so much. I learned a lot. I have been learning a lot from your poetry already. I learned a lot tonight as well. Also, thank you, Michael, for the classical guitar. One last shout out to Karen, because it's because of her and WordWorks that we have Café Muse. Gratitude to Henry. I call him a level 20 tech wizard. If you play D&D, you'll get that. Also to my fellow co-hosts, Ellen Cole, Renee Garrity, Henry Crawford, he wears many hats here, and Leah Johnson. Most importantly, thanks to you, our wonderful audience, for being here. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it will be up on Café Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow, most likely. And you can extend your enjoyment by purchasing the poets' books. Links have been in the chat. And please tell others about the series. Let them know where to register. Please join us for the WordWorks as Poets versus the Pandemic program on Wednesday, April 13th at 7, featuring poet Margot Taft-Stever, as well as guest poets Aaron Casedo, Kimura, and Mervyn Taylor. I hope you can join us for the next Café Muse as well, which will be on Monday, May 2nd at 7 p.m., featuring poets Barbara Ross and Maggie Smith. Please make sure you've registered on our Café Muse website so that you'll receive information on the event as well as the Zoom link. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, a wonderful spring. I hope we'll see you again next month. Thank you.